After the holidays in January, the weather here in Northern California can be really wet and cold. And this is the time when I like to turn back to some of my childhood classic German winter dishes. Well, that was a mouthful. Anyways, I'm super excited to take you along and share with you what we're cooking these days that makes us warm and cozy and reminisces me of the past. Reminisces? I think I tried to say remind me of my past. What is a good German dish without potatoes? In this dish, I am boiling potatoes, and I always like to find really good potatoes at the market, high quality, either Yukon Gold or russet potatoes. Sometimes I get the German butterballs because they taste really good. I love this little lid. It's silicone, it has these little slits, and nothing ever boils over. My mom gave that to me one year for Christmas. I might leave a link in the description box, so if you want to find it, you can find it. Cauliflower is the star in this dish. It's going to be a baked and I don't know, with like a sauce and then grilled cauliflower dish. And I like to use the outer bigger pieces of leaves and feed them to my dog, and that's why I put them in the pot underneath my steamer basket, so I know which one is which is for the dog and which one is for us. And then I'm cutting the cauliflower into smaller pieces, so A, that it steams faster, and B, that I can put the lid on it. I'm arranging everything in there, the lid goes on top, and I set that to boil. In another pot, I am melting some butter. And this is for the sauce. Getting my wire whisk right out of this drawer. I love having everything within reach, which is what I really like to do when I designed this kitchen and organized everything in my kitchen. While the butter is melting, I am adding just some flour, and as you can see, I'm never measuring anything, I'm eyeballing. So we probably have about 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter and about 2 to 3 tablespoons of flour. I'm gonna whisk that around while the butter is still melting, and it usually becomes like one clump. And that's the base for my sauce. Once that's cooked for a little bit, I'm slowly adding some milk. That's the raw milk that we get from local cows here. And as you can see, the sauce is thickening pretty quickly, and this is oftentimes called a roux and is the base for a lot of German sauces and recipes, actually. It's always amazing how much this will soak up in terms of milk. I'm adding a little bit more, maybe I'll have to add the entire bottle here. While this is gently cooking, I am cutting ham in smaller pieces. This was sliced ham. You can also use ham in a big piece and then just cut cubes. And I'm grating some Gouda cheese. This is the cheese that I had in the fridge, but other cheese might work just as well, like cheddar or whatever cheese you have. I'm gonna season my sauce with some salt. And fresh ground pepper. Has so much more aroma than anything out of a jar, and some fresh ground nutmeg. I'm gonna give that a quick taste. I think it's good, just because that is. Plus you'll get some extra saltiness from the cheese and the ham. Trying to melt the cheese here in the sauce. Adding the ham to the sauce. That actually makes this dish so much better than if you leave out the ham, which is why I always like to add it. Plus it's actually a very common German dish. The steamed cauliflower I'm putting in a cast iron skillet with some melted butter on the bottom so nothing burns on. arranging everything in there, and then I pour the sauce right over the cauliflower to cover most of it, spreading it around. And I like to add just some breadcrumbs on top. This is something you can always do with your stale bread if you ever have any. Breadcrumbs. And then I'm gonna put that under the broiler actually in a hot oven. And here is the cooked pieces of cauliflower for the dog. I'll put that in a separate bowl because she doesn't get everything in one sitting. I'll spread that out over a few days. My potatoes are boiled, and Germans have a love affair with boiled potatoes. I have this potato pick that I use. It has 3 little, they're not really prongs, they're almost like tines of a fork, if you will. And they're perfect for holding a hot potato so that you can peel it. Here's my finished dish. And just for some pop of color and a little extra vitamins, I'm adding some chopped parsley that I often have in the freezer already chopped and ready to go. And to dish this up, I'm just putting some of this on a plate. There's a lot of sauce on the bottom, but it's actually really thick. And getting all the ham in there, adding some boiled potatoes to it. This is such a classic winter dish, and if you ever don't know what to do with cauliflower, this will be it. And here my husband and I are enjoying it for dinner. After dinner and before the dog's dinner, she actually gets this piece of cauliflower, and you can see how she loves it. My next dish is going to be a lentil soup, or you could also call it a lentil stew because it's pretty thick. And I'm peeling an onion here, and as you can see, I have a piece that wasn't so good that I'm throwing out, but I'm saving all the other better onion pieces. And before I'm going to cut the onion, I am heating some avocado oil and just a splash of olive oil in my enameled cast iron pot that I love for these kind of dishes, and chop the onion into pieces. Now I'm gonna saute the onions in the hot oil. I love using a big cutting board because it gives me so much room, and I can just scoop everything right into my big pot. Now I'm peeling some carrots. I have multicolored carrots. I have a purple, yellow, and orange one with my vegetable peeler. I'll also leave a link because people often ask me where to get that vegetable peeler. It's so practical, and you can actually peel something very thinly without losing too much of the vegetable that you're peeling. I'm cutting the carrot also into small pieces, checking on my onions. As you can see, I'm multitasking here a little bit, chopping one and sauteing the other. But with time and experience, you can just make it all happen at the same time. I'm adding the carrots to my pot, and now I have some potatoes, same vegetable peeler. Giving everything a stir. Sometimes I can even hear it when things are sizzling a little bit too much and need a little extra stir. Here I'm adding about a cup of lentils, and then I have some homemade bone broth from a roast chicken that we had the other night, and I love to keep the bones and make really good bone broth. Not quite sure how much I'm going to add, but again, also those lentils soak up a lot of liquid. I might have to add a little bit more later. Now I'm going to peel those potatoes, and I will actually keep all the peels. As you can see there, I have a pile back there. The carrot peels, and then some of the onion pieces, not the really dry skin, but the pieces that have some actual onion on it. And I have a Ziploc bag in my freezer that I stuff with all these peels, and that's gonna be the base for my next bone broth. It adds so much flavor to my broth, and I always keep that going in the freezer. I have that ready when I need it. And also I'm cutting the potatoes in chunks. I like everything to be a little bit uniform in size so that you don't have bigger chunks of one vegetable and smaller chunks of another vegetable. I guess I need to add all of the bone broth to my stew. And all I need to do now is put a lid on it, check on it every so often, and it's ready to go within about half an hour. Since lentils have an interesting taste, I like to add some balsamic vinegar just to make it a little bit more interesting and to offset the earthiness of the lentils. A good helping of salt and pepper to season the lentil stew or the lentil dish. We'll mix all of that up really quickly, incorporate. And now I'm adding German Franks, or sometimes they're also called wieners. These come out of a glass jar that I found at World Market. You can also get them on Amazon. Link is below. And I'm just heating them up in this lentil stew. In the meantime, I have made some spätzle, and no, I didn't make these from scratch. I actually bought them in a package, but I often make my own spätzle, which makes this dish even better. And the lentil stew, as you can see, it's more of a stew than a soup, goes on the side of the lentils. And here's my chopped parsley again to make that dish look healthy and vibrant. For my next meal, I have some milk in a bowl and I'm adding breadcrumbs to it. Sometimes I use a bread roll, a stale bread roll, and soak that in the milk. And now I am chopping an onion, and I haven't even said what I'm making here. This is going to be German meatballs. They're very different from American meatballs, and sometimes they're called burgers, but they're not really burgers. To that, I crack an egg into the bowl, season with pepper and salt. Mix that around and let that sit for a little bit. And here is my ground beef that I'm using. A lot of Germans use a 50-50 ground pork and ground beef. And what happened here was that my ground beef wasn't completely thawed, so I had to fight with it a little bit, and I'm setting it aside because I want it to thaw a little bit more. And then I have kohlrabi, which is what we say in German, and I think in English it's also kohlrabi. There is no translation for this vegetable that is somewhat of a turnip, but it has more of a cabbage, like broccoli taste. And I'm keeping the leaves because you can actually eat them, and a few nights later I made some pesto with the kohlrabi leaves. And then I'm peeling the kohlrabi. Sometimes you have some more woody pieces at the very bottom close to the root. I like to cut those off, and they're easy to see because they're just a little bit white. And this is something that whenever I find kohlrabi at the market, I always grab it because I don't often find it, and I just love the taste of it, and it's so good, and especially with the sauce that I'm going to make. Again, cutting it into small dice, and then I'll put them in some water, not a whole lot, just a little bit to create some steam and to cook the kohlrabi. Getting all of that in there, and little bits and pieces. To that, I'm adding just a little bit of butter because butter makes this dish so much better. I know I've said this before, but it also brings out the kohlrabi flavor. And then some bouillon. This is really mostly for the flavor, and I love having that in the fridge because I use that a lot for seasoning. With the lid on top, I'll cook the kohlrabi until the pieces are done. again, here is potatoes. They cook on another burner with my silicone lid on top of it. And now I'm gonna make the meatballs. You can choose whatever size you want. I like them fairly small. First of all, they look like fun size. And secondly, you have a lot more and you can just figure out how much you want. And I think it's really nice to have them in a small size. Tucking the onion pieces in there. Checking here on my kohlrabi. The kohlrabi is actually soft. And now I'm adding a little bit of flour to it because I want to thicken the sauce. And I'm not going to make a real roux like for an earlier dish, but just to add it to thicken the sauce. Giving that a quick stir. I could have chosen a bigger spoon, but this one is always there and it's my favorite spoon. And here I have some homemade sour cream. It's so easy to make. I have another video which I'll link to. It is really quite literally so simple. And I'm adding a few tablespoons of sour cream to it. It makes it taste a little bit more creamy, and the sour cream adds some freshness to this dish. Let's see what it tastes like. It's really hot. Yum, yum, yum. It's really good. Over another burner, I am heating up my large cast iron skillet. And here I have a new oil that I'm pretty excited about and that I will probably make a video, a dedicated video about. So stay tuned for that. And once that is hot and the oil is really runny, I'm adding my little meatballs here. Sometimes Germans call them Frikadellen or Fleischpflanzerl. Some of you asked me to teach you a few German words or put them in the videos, and here I go. Frikadellen. Sometimes they're called Klopse, depending on which region you're from. Let's see if we can fit all of those in there. I guess we can. There we go. And I like to put a lid on to make them cook a little bit faster. There's always some water that sits on the inside of the lid. And once they're cooked thoroughly or fried on one side and browned, I flip them over to the other side. And of course, there's a little bit more work if you have a lot of small ones versus a few big ones, but I don't mind. My turner here is probably a little big for the small size, and getting the hot lid back on them so that they can cook on the other side. Here they are, all nicely browned and done. And they make the house smell so good. The potatoes I had already peeled and halved because they were very large potatoes, and I'm adding my creamy kohlrabi to it. And a few meatballs on the side. This is not an actual dish that you can find in a cookbook, but something that we like to eat fairly often with a sprinkling of chopped parsley. Here is another dish. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the box below this video. Thank you so much for joining me here in my kitchen, and I'll see you in the next video.